In the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood of Westbridge, New York, the Whitmans lived what appeared to be a perfect life. James Whitman was a respected corporate lawyer in his early 40s with a sharp mind and an even sharper smile. His wife, Emily, was a former art teacher turned stay-at-home mother to their two children, Lily, 8, and Ben, 5. Their home on Maplewood Drive exuded charm: white picket fence, manicured lawn, and a porch that saw frequent after-dinner gatherings with neighbors. But behind the picture-perfect facade, something sinister was brewing. The key to it all was Ava Rose, the 19-year-old nanny who had been working for the Whitman family for nearly a year. She had come highly recommended by a mutual friend of the Whitmans, and her youth and energy seemed to bring a fresh light into the household. James often joked that she was more like a daughter than an employee. What he didn't joke about was the late-night phone calls. What he didn't mention was how he'd sometimes disappear for hours during the day, returning with a strange look in his eyes. And what he certainly never said was that the bond between him and Ava had grown far beyond employer and employee. Ava, for her part, had always been drawn to James. He was kind, attentive, and unlike any man she had ever met. When they first started talking outside of work, it was innocent enough, discussing books, movies, and the kids' progress. But as the weeks passed, those conversations grew deeper, more personal, and eventually more dangerous. Their affair began quietly. A stolen kiss when no one was watching, a late-night drive under the stars. Then came the promises. Promises that James would leave his wife. Promises that he loved Ava more than anyone else. But love is rarely simple, especially when it involves secrets and lies. And secrets have a way of coming out, especially when someone dies. On a rainy Tuesday evening in early October, James Whitman was found dead in the garage of his home. A single gunshot wound to the chest, no signs of forced entry, no sign of struggle, just a body and a note left on the kitchen table that read, "I couldn't live without you." It was signed simply, J. The police were called. The media swarmed. And at the center of it all stood Ava Rose, pale, trembling, and silent. Detective Marcus Granger had seen many cases in his 20 years with the NYPD, but this one caught his attention. Something about the scene didn't feel right. The note, the timing, the sheer lack of emotion from Ava. It all pointed to something deeper than a simple suicide. As Detective Granger began his investigation, he would uncover a web of lies, hidden texts, secret meetings, and ultimately a murder that had been planned long before the gun was ever fired. This is the story of how a young woman's love became a deadly obsession, and how one detective unraveled the truth behind the Whitman tragedy. Detective Marcus Granger arrived at the Whitman residence just after midnight. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with tension and the lingering scent of gunpowder from the garage. He stepped into the home carefully, taking in every detail. The soft glow of a single lamp in the living room, the untouched dinner on the table, the children's toys scattered near the TV. Inside, Ava Rose sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red and puffy. She barely reacted when he entered. Across from her stood Emily Whitman, visibly shaken but composed, clutching a mug of tea like it was an anchor to reality. Granger began by reviewing the scene. James Whitman had been found slumped over the steering wheel of his car, the engine off, headlights dimly flickering through the garage window. No signs of forced entry or struggle. A .38 caliber revolver lay on the passenger seat. Ballistics would confirm if it was his own weapon. The suicide note, "I couldn't live without you," was handwritten, left in the kitchen. It was unsigned except for the letter J, which could be James, or it could be something else entirely. Granger started with the basics. Interviews. He spoke first with Emily. Her voice was steady as she described the last time she saw James alive. "He kissed me goodbye before he left for work this morning," she said. "He seemed tired but happy. Nothing out of the ordinary." Then came the children. Lily and Ben were taken in by child services for questioning later that night. For now, they stayed with a neighbor while investigators searched the house. Ava was next. Granger sat across from her in the dining room, notebook open, pen ready. "Miss Rose," he said, "can you tell me what happened?" She looked up slowly, eyes wide with fear. I don't know, she whispered. He was supposed to pick me up tonight. We were going to talk about things, but he never showed. I called him. No answer. Then I got the call from the police. Granger noted her hesitation. You were expecting Mr. Whitman to meet with you tonight? Ava nodded. We had plans. He said he needed to talk to me, that we needed to figure out what to do next. What did you mean by figure out what to do next? She blinked. I don't know. He didn't say. He just said it was important. Granger pressed gently. Did he ever mention anything about ending his marriage? About leaving Mrs. Whitman? Ava hesitated again. He wanted to. He said he loved me more than anything, that he was trying to make it happen. Interesting, Granger thought. Not confirmation, but enough to plant a seed of doubt. As the interview continued, Granger asked about their relationship. Ava admitted they had grown close, but insisted it was innocent. He was like a father to me, she said. Granger didn't believe her. Not yet. Back at the station, the digital forensics team began analyzing James's phone and laptop. They also pulled Ava's devices under suspicion. Texts, emails, and location data would soon tell a different story. In the meantime, Granger reviewed the timeline. 7 a.m. James left for work. 11:45 a.m. Ava sent a text to James asking how his day was going. 12:15 p.m. James responded, Long. Miss you. 3:30 p.m. Ava sent another message. Meet me tonight? 3:45 p.m. James replied, Need to talk. Be there at 9. That was the last message. By 10:30 p.m., James was dead. Something wasn't adding up. Granger also discovered that James had recently taken out a life insurance policy, naming Ava as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been written only 2 weeks prior. And then there was the alibi, or lack thereof. No one saw James after he left work. No surveillance footage captured him returning home. Only Ava claimed to have expected him. As the investigation deepened, Granger knew he was dealing with more than a grieving young woman. He was dealing with someone who had planned this, and he was determined to find out why. The digital forensics team worked through the night, and by morning, they had compiled a damning timeline of messages between James Whitman and Ava Rose. The texts were not just flirtatious, they were emotionally charged, desperate, and increasingly possessive. Detective Marcus Granger sat at his desk, sipping black coffee as he scrolled through the recovered data on a secure laptop. Each message painted a clearer picture of an affair that was far from innocent. The first notable exchange came 2 months prior to the murder. Ava, you mean so much to me. James, I know. I can't keep pretending otherwise. Ava, I don't want you to pretend anymore. James, I'm trying, but it's not easy with her still around. This pattern repeated itself over time. Cryptic references to Emily, expressions of guilt, and growing frustration over their inability to be together openly. Then came the more alarming messages. James, I need to get out of this marriage. I've talked to my lawyer. It's going to take time. Ava, how long? James, months, maybe years, but I'll do it for us. Ava, I can't wait that long. James, I know, me neither. Granger paused here. There was something in Ava's tone that stood out. Desperation, impatience, a sense that she wasn't content waiting for a divorce. He continued reading. 2 weeks before the murder, James sent Ava a message that raised even more questions. James, I found someone who might help. He said there are options. Ava, what kind of options? James, options we don't have to talk about now. Just trust me. Ava, I do. Always. Granger frowned. Options was vague, but in the context of a man trapped in a failing marriage and a woman who clearly wanted him free, the word took on a darker meaning. He turned to the timeline again. The last message Ava received from James was at 3:45 p.m. on the day of the murder. James, need to talk. Be there at 9. That was followed by no further communication. No call, no text, no response from James after 8:47 p.m. when Ava called and left a voicemail. Granger noted that Ava's phone had been active all evening. She had sent several messages to friends checking in on them. Her location data showed she was at home until nearly 10 p.m., then abruptly stopped recording. That meant either her phone was turned off or the signal dropped. He also discovered that James's phone had not been used after 6:20 p.m. No calls, no texts, no GPS movement. His last known location was his office, 3 miles from his house. So where was he in the hour between 6:20 p.m. and 9 p.m.? And why did Ava say she expected him at 9 p.m. if he never showed up? Granger reviewed the security footage from nearby businesses and street cameras. At 7:15 p.m., James was seen entering a convenience store 2 blocks from his home. He bought a 6-pack of beer and a pack of cigarettes. He was alone. At 7:40 p.m., he walked into a gas station across town, still alone. At 8 p.m., nothing. No sightings, no traffic camera capture. At 8:50 p.m., he was nowhere to be found. But Ava claimed to be waiting for him at 9 p.m. Something was missing. Granger knew that alibis could be faked, especially when emotions ran high and stakes were life or death. But he also knew that people made mistakes. People left traces behind, cell towers, surveillance angles, witnesses. He needed to find one of those traces. Meanwhile, the forensics team delivered another piece of the puzzle. James's car had been wiped clean. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. Whoever placed the gun in the car had taken great care to leave no evidence. That meant either James staged his own death or someone else did it for him. Granger's mind raced. If this was a suicide, why wipe down the car? Why erase every trace of his presence? It didn't add up. As the sun rose over New York City, Detective Granger prepared for his next move. He would visit the Whitman home once more, this time with a warrant to search for anything he might have missed. He was close to the truth, and he was running out of time. Detective Marcus Granger arrived at the Whitman home before sunrise. The sky was a deep gray, and the air carried the crisp chill of early autumn. He had a warrant now, fully signed and sealed, and with it, he led a small team into the house for a thorough search. The previous day's investigation had turned up nothing in the main living areas, but something about the case still didn't sit right with him. James Whitman had been a man of routine, a man who left no mess behind. If he had died by his own hand, the scene would have been clean, not staged, and yet there were too many inconsistencies to ignore. Granger began in the garage. The car had already been taken to the police impound lot for further analysis, so he focused on the space itself. He ran his fingers along the walls, checking for anything out of place. Then near the back wall, just above a storage shelf, he noticed something unusual, a slight indentation in the drywall, almost like a hidden panel. He motioned for one of his officers to bring a crowbar. With careful precision, they pried open the wall. Behind it lay a narrow, concealed room, no larger than a closet. Inside, the space was empty, except for a single wooden crate. Granger opened it slowly. Inside were documents, stacks of them, bank statements, property deeds, legal papers, and personal correspondence. At first glance, they appeared to be mundane, but as Granger flipped through them, he realized they told a different story entirely. James Whitman had been hiding money, not just a little, hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred under various shell companies and offshore accounts. There were also records of multiple properties registered under fake names. One was a cabin in Vermont, another a townhouse in Miami. But what caught Granger's attention most were the letters, handwritten notes between James and Ava. Unlike their text messages, these were more personal, more emotional. They revealed a side of the relationship that even the digital trail hadn't captured. One letter dated 2 weeks before the murder read, "Ava, I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. Every time I look at Emily, I see you slipping away from me. I want to leave her. I want to be with you, but I can't do it quietly. She knows something is wrong. She suspects everything. If I stay, we lose each other forever. If I go, I risk losing everything else. I don't know what to do. I need your help." Another, written by Ava, was far more direct. You're making this harder than it has to be. You don't have to run. You don't have to wait. You could just disappear. Make it simple. Make it final. I'm tired of waiting for you to choose me. Make it happen tonight. Granger felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just an affair. It was a plan in motion, and someone had already decided that James Whitman wouldn't live long enough to make his choice. He carefully packed the documents into evidence bags and called for backup. The hidden room was now officially part of the case file. As the sun rose higher, Granger returned to the main house. He needed to speak with Ava again, but this time, with the weight of new evidence behind him. Back at the station, he prepared for the next phase of the investigation. He knew the truth was close now. The question was whether Ava would confess before he had to build the case against her. And if she did confess, what exactly had happened that fateful night? There was still one more piece of the puzzle missing, and Granger was determined to find it. Detective Marcus Granger sat across from Ava Rose in a small, dimly lit interrogation room at the Westbridge Police Department. A single overhead light flickered slightly, casting long shadows on the table between them. On the wall behind her, a clock ticked steadily, each second echoing the growing tension. Granger placed a folder of evidence on the table. "Ava," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we found a lot since last night. Your letters to James, his hidden assets, and now we have something else." He slid a photo across the table. It was a screenshot of a deleted text message recovered by forensics. The timestamp read 8:23 p.m., just minutes before James Whitman's estimated time of death. James: "I'm outside. I can't do this anymore." Ava: "Come inside. We need to talk." James: "What if she wakes up?" Ava: "She won't. She's asleep. Come on." James: "Okay." The conversation ended there. No more messages, no more texts, just silence after that point. Granger leaned forward. "You were expecting him, weren't you? You told me you were waiting for him at 9 o'clock. But he showed up earlier." Ava swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the door. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," Granger pressed. "This is the same language you used when you told me you had plans with him tonight. But according to your phone data, you were home until almost 10. That means you lied." Ava looked down at the table, fingers twisting around each other. "He came over because he was scared. He didn't want to leave her. He needed time." "And you gave it to him," Granger said, his tone shifting. "Or did you try to make sure he never got the chance?" Silence stretched between them. Then slowly Ava spoke. "I loved him," she whispered. "I still do. But every time I tried to get close, he pulled away. He talked about leaving her, but he never did. I waited, and nothing changed." Granger nodded. "So you decided to help him along?" Ava shook her head. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I just wanted him to choose me. For once, I wanted him to pick me." "What happened that night?" She took a deep breath. "He came in quietly. The kids were asleep. Emily was too. He looked so sad. He said he couldn't do it, that he didn't have the strength to walk away. Then what?" He started pacing, talking about how much he loved me, but how he was trapped. "I told him it wasn't fair, that I wasn't going to wait forever, that I deserved more than broken promises." Granger watched her closely. "Did he reach for the gun?" "No," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I did." There was a pause as the weight of her words settled into the air. "He was standing near the hallway," she continued. "He didn't see me pull it out. I held it up. I told him I couldn't lose him again, that I wouldn't let him go back to her." Granger's pen hovered above his notepad. "And then?" Ava wiped her eyes. "He reached for me, told me I didn't have to do this, that he would stay, that he would fight for us." She closed her eyes. "But I didn't believe him. Not really. I thought maybe if I made him choose, he'd finally decide." Her voice broke. "I shot him." Granger let the silence settle before speaking again. "Why didn't you call for help?" "I panicked," she admitted. "I didn't know what to do. I cleaned the car, I hid the gun. I tried to make it look like a suicide." "But you knew better," Granger said. "You knew it wouldn't hold up, that someone would find the truth." She looked up at him, her face pale. "I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I just wanted him to be mine." Granger stood, gathering his notes. "That's not love, Ava. That's obsession." He left the room without another word, leaving Ava alone with the reality of what she had done. Outside the door, he called for backup. The case was no longer about suspicion or circumstantial evidence. It was about a young woman who had lost herself in a dangerous fantasy and a man who had become the victim of her desperation. As the sun set over New York, Detective Granger prepared for the final chapter of the Whitman tragedy. The truth was out. Now justice would follow. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Ava Rose's trial. Reporters from local and national media filled the back rows, their cameras flashing as the defendant entered in a gray suit, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The judge, a stern-faced woman with decades of experience, looked over the room before calling the case to order. Ava Rose sat quietly at the defense table, flanked by her attorney, a well-known criminal defense lawyer named Daniel Mercer. Across from them stood the prosecution team led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Nguyen, a sharp and methodical woman known for her no-nonsense approach. The trial centered around one question: was Ava Rose guilty of murder? From the moment the evidence began rolling in, it became clear that the jury had already been swayed by the mountain of circumstantial proof and emotional testimony. Detective Marcus Granger took the stand first. He calmly recounted the events leading up to James Whitman's death, his investigation, the hidden room, the letters, the texts, and the timeline that placed Ava at the scene. When asked if he believed the death was staged, he nodded. "Yes," he said. James Whitman did not kill himself. The next witness was Emily Whitman. She appeared fragile but composed as she spoke about her marriage, her children, and the man she had loved for years. Her voice cracked when she described finding her husband's body in the garage, but she held it together long enough to testify that she had never suspected an affair until after his death. Then came the digital evidence. Forensic experts presented the recovered messages between Ava and James, showing how their relationship had evolved from affectionate to obsessive. The most damning message, "I shot him," was read aloud in court, followed by Ava's own confession to Detective Granger. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when the prosecution played a recording of Ava's final conversation with James, reconstructed from deleted audio files and transcribed text. It was raw, emotional, and disturbingly intimate. "James, I don't want to do this anymore." Ava, "Then don't go back to her." James, "You know I can't just leave everything behind." Ava, "Yes, you can. You have me now." James, "I'm trying." Ava, "No, you're not." The recording ended there, but the implications were clear. Ava's defense team tried to argue that she had acted out of passion and mental instability, claiming she was young, emotionally vulnerable, and under immense pressure. They suggested that James had encouraged the relationship and that Ava had been manipulated into taking matters into her own hands. But the prosecution countered with the facts. Ava had planned the meeting, wiped the car clean of evidence, and even left the suicide note. She had also taken out life insurance on James, naming herself the sole beneficiary, a detail that raised eyebrows among the jurors. Over the course of the week-long trial, the defense offered little in the way of rebuttal. The evidence was too strong, the timeline too precise, and the motive too clear. On the final day, Ava was called to the stand. She looked directly at the jury and spoke with a voice that wavered between guilt and defiance. "I loved him," she said, "and I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted him to choose me." The silence in the courtroom was heavy. After deliberating for less than 2 hours, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty. Ava Rose was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and the emotional manipulation involved. As Ava was led away in handcuffs, Emily Whitman stood and whispered a quiet prayer. The children would never see their father again, but at least they could finally begin to heal. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed the family. Questions flew fast and furious, but Emily simply turned to her children and held them close. For Detective Marcus Granger, the case was a reminder that love, when twisted into obsession, could lead to unimaginable consequences. And for the people of Westbridge, it was a story they would tell for years to come. A tale of a perfect home, a secret affair, and a deadly truth that changed lives forever. In the months following Ava Rose's sentencing, the small community of Westbridge found itself haunted not just by the memory of James Whitman's death, but by the unsettling truth that had come to light in the trial. What had seemed like a quiet, respectable family now became the subject of whispered conversations in school drop-offs, grocery store lines, and neighborhood gatherings. The Whitman home on Maplewood Drive remained shuttered for weeks after the funeral. The once bright blue shutters were closed, the porch swing still hanging from its rusting chains. Neighbors tried to be respectful, leaving casseroles on the steps and sending get-well cards to Emily, who rarely opened the door. When she did, it was only to speak with Detective Granger or her own attorney, sorting through the legal and emotional wreckage left behind. Lily and Ben, now in the care of their maternal grandmother, began attending therapy sessions. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, but they knew something was wrong. Lily would sometimes ask when Daddy was coming home, while Ben would draw pictures of a house with no people in it. Their teacher at school reported that they had become withdrawn, often sitting alone at lunch and avoiding group activities. Emily, though physically present, was emotionally distant. She gave one interview to a local newspaper shortly after the trial, declining to comment further. In that brief statement, she said, "Love should never destroy, it should protect." The quote spread quickly online, shared as a cautionary sentiment about relationships gone wrong. Meanwhile, the town grappled with the implications of the case. At first, many residents had been sympathetic to Ava. After all, she was just 19, and her youth made her seem like a victim of manipulation. But as the evidence mounted and her own words were read aloud in court, public opinion shifted. Some called her a monster. Others claimed she was simply a girl lost in love. A few even suggested James had brought it upon himself by straying into an inappropriate relationship with someone so much younger. Local churches held vigils for the Whitman children, while schools introduced new lessons on healthy relationships and consent. Teachers used the case, not directly but thematically, as a way to discuss boundaries, power imbalances, and the dangers of letting emotions control decisions. Detective Marcus Granger, ever the professional, kept his distance from the media spotlight. He received commendations from both his superiors and the community, but he declined most interviews. When asked if the case had changed him, he simply said, "Every case changes you. This one just took longer to close." Back at the station, the files on the Whitman case were locked away, marked as solved, conscientiously. But the echoes of the tragedy continued to ripple outward. For some, it served as a warning. For others, a lesson in how easily lives can be shattered by choices made in the name of love. Ava Rose began serving her sentence in a state correctional facility upstate. Letters came in infrequently at first, mostly from her parents, then later from no one at all. She was placed in a program for first-time offenders, where she studied psychology and wrote essays on the nature of obsession and regret. Whether she truly understood the gravity of her actions remained unclear, but her letters to the judge, written during her first year in prison, hinted at a slow awakening. In time, the news cycle moved on. The headlines faded, the cameras stopped rolling, and life in Westbridge returned to its usual rhythm, though nothing was quite the same. The Whitman home was eventually sold. The new owners painted the walls a warm beige and replaced the front door. The fence was fixed. The grass was mowed. But every now and then, a neighbor would glance over and wonder if the silence inside still carried the weight of a past that refused to be forgotten. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the city, Detective Granger sat in his office, staring out the window, thinking about the case that had taken nearly a year to solve, and wondering if, somewhere else in the world, another secret was waiting to be uncovered. Because in the end, the truth always has a way of coming out, even when it takes a life to do it.